Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. Well, that was pretty good fun for a Wednesday night, wasn't it? Not if you're a Manchester City fan, however. Pep Guardiola's side dumped out of the Champions League by Real Madrid and the brilliance of Kylian Mbappe. Back in the Premier League, Aston Villa drew a cracking game with the leaders Liverpool as Marcus Rashford starts for the first time in 81 days, but Darwin Núñez fails to find the net again. On today's show, we'll discuss both those big matches as well as heartbreak for Celtic, some curious goings on at Atalanta, and look ahead to the weekend's action too. I'm Tom Clarke, and joining me today we have the football reporter covering London and the south of England. It's Pete Rutzler, the Times columnist and reporter James Gheerbrant, and the former left-back and centre-back who once had a failed 60-minute spell as a central midfielder for Nottingham Forest. Gregor Robertson is here too.
I thought we were finished with that.
No, but you mentioned it on Monday and I realised I'd never used it as a fact about you. And also, you know, we've got some footballing hipsters here, people who like their tactics, James and Pete. I thought, you know, your venture as an inverted fullback as a midfielder.
It wasn't an inverted fullback. I was in midfield in a 3-5-2 and it failed.
Okay. You're in a 3 in the middle, you weren't in a 2.
Yeah.
This was the revelation on Monday's show when we were talking about players playing out of position. Tony Cascarino played as a centre-back and it turns out Gregor had 60 minutes as a centre-mid.
Yeah. I don't think that was the only 60 minutes. I think I did elsewhere too, but usually it didn't last long. Didn't last long. Anyway, let's get on with talking about the action. And you know what? I'm going to let you guys choose. We're going to start with City, Real Madrid. That's the only edict I've got. But you tell me, do you want to start with Mbappe and Madrid or do you want to start with City? Don't all shout at once. Go.
Mbappe? Should we do
Mbappe? Let's go.
It was his night, wasn't it?
It's the good stuff.
Start with
involve City. So
start with
positive.
the good stuff.
Let's
Start
be
with
positive.
Mbappe, quite a good player. Do we think? Yeah, he's all right.
He's got a chance.
He's done all right.
He'll go far. He'll go far. Gregor, what did you think of his goals? I'm interested from a defending point of view, and I know this is when you go, I couldn't ever defend against Kylian Mbappe, but the way he scored all 3 goals, and I wanted to ask first about the second goal with the sitting them all down and then looking at them. I mean, there were lots of things about this hat-trick that were I am the big I am, but I think that is the most of them.
Is there like
a
clip of him just sort of pointing
the
to
celebration?
Gvardiol?
I did wonder if that's what it was.
He had a little look at Gvardiol, who was on the floor, being like, I went that way, mate, actually. Sorry, you didn't quite get it. Tough night for City's defence.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that, it looks quite simple almost, just that Pete and I were talking about before, it's this way he can stop and start so quickly. It's the explosive nature of his game that's just remarkable. And I mean, you slow it down, you think that looked quite easy, kind of just a small little shimmy that sent Kusanov sprawling, and then cutting inside Gvardiol, and then playing it and basically giving the goalkeeper the eyes as well. It all looks quite simple when it's slowed down, but doing that at full speed, it's just like spellbinding. So
we were saying before, like you think of players like Arjen Robben, it's very different, but had a very clear way of doing things, would do the same thing all the time. And Mbappe kind of doesn't do the same things all the time, but it's never elaborate, it's never extensive. It's just it's a shimmy into space, and suddenly he's got a couple of yards and can get a shot away. And there's nothing overly exceptional about that, but as Gregor says, there's how quick he can do it, his explosivity, but it's also just how he reads the defender, and the timing. Like the timing, you can't really get a proper sense of the extent of how impressive it is, because he's reading the defender. It's what Lionel Messi would do, right?
Yeah.
His movements were always tailored to when the defender would be just that slightly bit off balance in a certain direction, then I can go the other way. And it's the same thing, but it's always just before he gets a shot off. And we saw that particularly with the third goal as well, in particular, where it's Phil Foden, which is not the ideal defender.
Yes, we will come on to the City defending in a minute.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
the first one too. I mean, I think Rio Ferdinand said it in commentary too. Like, if you're a defender playing against Mbappe, your first fear is always in behind you, and your first sort of
Hoofball Madrid,
anxiety,
just knocking it long.
Your primary fear is if someone plays it in behind, this guy's rapid, and they just
But again, that first goal as well is similar
It was a
to the
straight
thing
ball.
you're talking about, Pete. It looks quite simple, and as I said, I'm joking about Hoofball Madrid and things, but to pull that
No,
off.
the first one was really poor from the City. It was a straight ball. There was
No, but we're
guile
coming on
about
to
it.
City in a minute. We're talking about Mbappe. This is your choice. This is your choice. You decided this. I'm talking about that finish, being able to kind of hold him off, create that shape with his body that allows him the space to hook the ball. Again, looks really simple. Looks kind of quite a normal goal, but actually is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of agility and it's all about speed.
But speed
It's
of
kind of
thought
economy of
as
movement
much
and
as
everything, yeah.
like if you combine his actual raw speed with the speed of thought, and it's unplayable, and I think that's what we saw last night really from him.
Yeah, James, I was talking with Ian Hawkey after the game about the players around him as well. Rodrigo, Vinicius, Jude Bellingham. Much had been made this season about could Carlo Ancelotti get them all to work, get them all to gel, trying to find problems in the idea of having all these wonderful players like the great journalists that we are. It did look like last night that he was getting them all to work together.
Definitely. And I think the other thing that I thought about is, for me, this match is not just about Mbappe, well, obviously it is a little bit, but it's not just about City being really bad at the moment. For me, it's also about the long-term team building at Real Madrid and City. Like you go back to and I was looking back at the teams that played in that 4-0 sort of, kind of 2 seasons ago in the semi-final.
Yeah.
And you've got both were pretty seasoned teams. You had Madrid with, Benzema and Kroos and Modric and Carvajal, and you had City with Ederson, Walker, De Bruyne, Bernardo, Gundogan. But it's like Madrid, I think, have managed the evolution away from that aging team so much better. And you have to say they've had that innate advantage of being Real Madrid, and the fact that Jude Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe wanted to sign for Real Madrid because they're Real Madrid, and there's no getting away from that. But you also look at the fact that they've bought not only those 2 players, but they've added, they've also added players like Endrick and Arda Güler, who are going to be the next phase of this team. And then, you look at how City have managed it, and they've lost one player in Julian Alvarez, who was going to, who you had hoped to be the cornerstone of that evolution. You've got a player like Josko Gvardiol, who was signed as, arguably the outstanding young centre-back in world football, but hasn't played that much at centre-back, has played quite a lot at left-back.
Marauding left-back now.
Hasn't really developed as a centre-back in the way that you might have hoped that he would. And they've now obviously just done this whole tranche of recruitment, where they've signed Kusanov and Vitor Rice and Marmoush and Nico Gonzalez. But it feels like a very kind of emergency sort of splurge, as opposed to the way Madrid have done it, which feels much more kind of thoughtful and long-sighted, and just much kind of, I think they've just managed that evolution much better. And to me, that's one of the things that stands out.
Do you think that's because they had, you talked about those players, Walker and De Bruyne and some of those players, because they were so good.
Yeah.
And we've talked on this podcast, Gregor, you've talked about it a lot, that drop-off happening so quickly. But was it the faith stayed with them too long because Pep had been there so long? Do you think it's just lacking a little bit of ruthlessness? Do you think?
Yeah, maybe. It's really hard to say because I think it's sort of. I think it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
They all sort of feels like they all got old at about the same time, and that's really hard, right? That's really hard to sort of. I mean, it's not hard to foresee, but I suppose it's hard to pinpoint exactly.
It's hard to make the call because if say last summer
also
or
when you're being hugely successful.
a year ago, if they'd have started selling these players, we'd have all gone, "Oh my God, what are they doing? Why on earth are they playing that?"
I'm not. It's not so much that I think they should have gone out and sold them all, but it's like it's the sort of like it's the phasing in,
the slow build,
the bedding in of, and and again, maybe they were simply a little bit unlucky. Maybe they were unlucky that Alvarez just didn't like wanted to go to Spain for sort of more personal reasons or whatever, But yeah, that to me feels like a big factor in what we saw.
Also, I always say when I watch City now is that Rodri makes other players look older.
Right.
Sorry, his absence makes them look older too. So he did so much, the protective work in midfield that you look at Gundogan now. Craig, at that moment when he passed the ball straight to Rodrigo and just ran over and clattered him in the first half, you think, he just looks a mile off it now.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing we were talking about Mbappe with that third goal. That third goal was the most damning, in my opinion, for City. I don't know what you guys think, but because I was in the office and I was watching it and was saying to all our production staff and things, all we need now is an Mbappe hat-trick. That's a nice, that's a nice narrative to cap off the night. So every time that Real were attacking, people were going, Tom, here we go, this could be it. And that was a counter-attack, wasn't it? Where they had like 3-on-3 at one point. And I can't remember who it was. Maybe Rodrigo kind of slowed it all down. And so when you're working and you then turn back to something else or go and watch a bit of Villa or make sure some copies come in or something, and then someone goes, goal, he scored. And I was like, what? I thought City had all got back in. They had everyone back in and he still scored. And I know, Pete, you touched on it before. Fine, it's Phil Foden. He's not a defender. But that was pretty dismal attempt at blocking that shot, wasn't he? I know Mbappe's quick. I know he can do the shuffle. But that goal, to get everyone back in, Gregor...
Yeah, but then when
still concede.
when everyone was back in, everyone was looking at someone else to do the most
which
important
has been
next
the
thing,
common
which was close them
theme
down.
of City this season, isn't it? We
Yeah.
talked about that with I think the PSG one, with that ball across the box that went, and everyone's looking. I think I said this exact thing. Everyone's looking and going, "That's not mine." Oh God,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And I'm not. Oh God, I don't fancy closing Mbappe down.
Yeah.
What is that then? Do we think? Because that's beyond aging players, aging quality. Is that confidence? Is that they've
it's a little
completely
bit-
shot to bits this season, and they're thinking, "Oh my God, we're not invincible anymore."
Well, I think there's a start point. I think because, I mean, there was a bit more optimism about what City might look like coming into this game because of the Newcastle result, right? And what was so striking about that was the way Nico Gonzalez had played, and the way he was praised was because of his ball retention, and how City may have lost some of that without Rodri, and how that just makes the whole system work. You know, in terms of controlling a game both in and out of possession, having someone able to do that with more, you know, more readily, it allows that extra time for recoveries. It's just the whole system seems to flip one way or the other with it. Obviously, you then come into this game and you suddenly see that the gulf is a lot bigger.
Yeah,
and maybe there's an element of, you know, this system has to play at this level with some key positions like, well, as we know with Rodri, facilitating everyone else. And I do think with the age point as well with City, they're not as old age-wise, I think. Real Madrid, what they've done quite well is that they've had that and been able to bed them in with players who've just kept going for a lot longer at that level.
yeah.
But maybe there's a point in that in itself, in that if you have that ready-made coming through behind them, it allows them to sustain themselves for that bit longer too.
But that final goal was like, we're getting to the point where I was almost starting to feel sorry for them watching it, just because it did look like they could be really pummeled. I think 3-1 flattered City in the end.
Big time. Do you know what it? Go on,
So
James.
talking about that sort of that sense of, you know, feeling sorry for people, I think we've got to talk about Kuznov and the sort of, you know, the treatment of Kuznov. I mean, I just think this is incredible that you've got this young kid who's
20, isn't he?
20 years
Yeah.
old. He doesn't speak English, and so, you know, no one can. There's no real common way for his teammates to communicate with him. You know, no one can sort of say to him, you know, tuck in, or sort of, you know, like, you know, any
Or
of
chin
the,
up, or keep going.
Well, literally, I mean, you, Gregor, you have a much better idea of, you know, of what players say to each other, you know, when things are going wrong, to sort of, you know, pick them up, or sort of, you know, like point something out, or walk, but, you know, but he doesn't have it. So he's playing in this kind of, in his own kind of bubble,
Little
almost.
bubble, yeah.
And it's like his first start was that game against Chelsea, where he barely signed, and
Yeah.
it was a real ordeal for him. And had he started a match in between those?
Don't think so, no.
So his second start, you know, comes as.
No, I think he played against Newcastle.
Did he start?
Did he
against-
start?
think-
He played. I don't know whether he started.
Came on
Anyway,
against Leighton Orient, but your
in any
point
case,
stands,
and
whatever,
then he comes and plays as a right back up against Vinicius Junior, and it's just, you know, this is so not the kind of ideal, optimal way into.
It's so
And-
far
and-
from
and, you know,
ideal.
obviously, like, I know that, you know, obviously he's a professional footballer, and, you know, he's you know, he's played in Ligue 1, you know, he's you know, he's a really good player, and you know, you obviously can't, you know, that you can't kind of, I'm not saying wrap him in cotton wool forever, but I think, like, you know, it strikes me that, like, yeah, this is not really been a very kind of protective or kind of careful way to integrate this young new player who doesn't speak English into the team. And again, maybe that's just pure bad luck and circumstance. Maybe, you know, because it's also a function of injuries, right?
Yep.
It's when you get these kind of, like, you know, these sort of downstream effects from injuries where, you know, Rodri's out. So, you know, you know, maybe John Stones plays further forward, and so, like, you know,
Rico Lewis or whatever. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's still just like it's very much not ideal.
It's like an emblem of their desperation at the moment as well. Like, 'cause it's so far removed from what Guardiola normally does with new signings.
And it's also, to James's point earlier about Real Madrid, the opposite of what you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? If this happens at successful, well-functioning club, Kusanov comes in, and I think you've made this point on recent shows as well, Gregor, about he doesn't play maybe for a few weeks. He maybe plays against Leyton Orient. He comes on when they're 3-0 up at home against Southampton or whatever.
But even last night, he had a visa issue, didn't he? So he didn't get to
That's right. He hadn't.
He didn't get to the hotel till 1 a.m. He
Yeah.
had to go via Greece to get a Schengen area visa. You're absolutely right. Like it's not even there's no intermediate language either. It's Russian. Didn't speak any French because he was in France for basically a year. Comes straight from Belarus
It is crazy.
This is such a massive culture shock as much as anything for a player like that. And so I was thinking the exact same thing last night. He's in the Bernabeu. There's Mbappe there. Like that would have been so far removed for him just 18 months before.
I actually think all things considered, he did all right.
Yeah. Well, that was the only thing I was going to say. There was a moment where I think
After that debut too.
I think it was Vinicius tried to burn him on the
Yeah, and he did
outside,
him.
Gareth Bale style.
He's quick.
And I was like, do you know what? He's quick. I'll give him that. At least he's absolutely rapid. Like playing in right back.
He's a really good player. Like
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about his ability. You don't make that rise.
And I think he's clearly a very good player, and I'm sure he's also a very resilient young man. And
Yeah.
I'm sure also that City will get good people around him, and sort of things will get easier for him. He'll pick up the language, but it's just so not ideal because Kusanov's come in to be part of this sort of regeneration of the team, and you've now got in sort of a slightly kind of someone who an asset who you're going to need to slightly build back up. It's just anyway. It's sort of
It's absolutely fascinating. Gregor, you...
No, I think that's true. I also think that people just think because it's Pep Guardiola and it's Man City that the regeneration will be swift and complete.
Yeah.
I think the damage, we can't underestimate the damage that is being done to Manchester City at this point, not just to individuals like James has said, but I think to Guardiola's standard.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a broader sense. I just mean within the dressing room, within people suddenly looking at this leader, this figure who's one of the greatest coaches in modern football history, and suddenly having some doubts about him.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the answers. We
Do you know...
neither do we. This is
Yeah.
there's damage being done here, and it's not. I don't think I've said it for a while. I don't think it's going to be a swift recovery.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Pete and James, both you that question, but to that point, it was the first time I've been more on the kind of camp of no, this is Man City, this is Pep Guardiola, this is Man City. Last night, for the first time, I was more in your camp, Gregor, about this team, and it reminded me a little bit, and I think it's because it was a big Champions League night. And I know they've spent more money, they've had more success, they've only recently won the treble, so it's not the same, listeners, but it reminded me a little bit of the end of Arsene Wenger's Arsenal in terms of having a lot of players that were brilliant once, a lot of players with good potential, and a kind of feeling that they're not quite what they were. It was just, and ultimately getting onto a big stage against a team who are much better than them, and that they had been competing with previously on other big nights in Europe in years gone by, and that actually very quickly they're suddenly like, oh my God, we're not at it anymore. But so to Gregor's point, and feel free to either tell me that I'm completely wrong on that, James and Pete, but Gregor and last week Martin and Johnny were saying, don't know whether Guardiola lasts this 2 years, this rebuild. James, Pete, what do you think about that? Pete, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't know about the Arsenal comparison just because of the context and.
It's all right, you can say I'm an idiot. It's fine.
No, I'm not going to say that. I think it comes from a good place. I think
that is the best put down on this podcast all season. Absolutely fantastic. It comes from a good place.
I think City can remould their squad in a way that Arsenal couldn't in that period, and I think that the players that they have at this end point are still that much more. They've still got Haaland, they've still got Rodri, they've still got Edison. There's Ruben Diaz. These are world-class players. But I think that the general idea about how deep the curve is, I completely agree. I think there is a longer-term element to this, and I think the extent to which Pep Guardiola is going to want to be a part of this rebuild, and when you're looking at teams in the Premier League who are a couple of stages above, and it's hard, it's easier to fall than it is to climb back up in a swift way. And I think when you look at Liverpool and their evolution, and you look at Arsenal and their evolution, and how they still haven't won a title, it takes time, and Guardiola will know this. And you do wonder if he will want to see out the 2 years for sure.
It's easier to fall than to climb back up. That's beautiful. Have you got that as a bit of poetry on your fridge or something?
I haven't, no.
I think
bit of motivation. Sun Tzu, isn't it?
James, just a final word from you on Pep and that idea about whether he lasts this rebuild.
Look, I know I said it on the podcast a couple of months ago. That I think his contract, his new contract, takes him to like 2027 is the end of the new contract, I think, and
2 years from the end of this summer,
from the end of this season. And City, this is like, we're in February 2025 and City have been playing pretty badly for like 2.5 months, 3 months now. And I think at the time the perception of Guardiola's new contract was it's the best thing that could happen. It's that stability.
It's the boost they need.
It's the boost they needed, exactly. Yeah. But it's also, it's a gamble. It's a gamble on Pep still having it, and I'm not saying he doesn't. I think I still kind of feel in somewhere deep down that if I absolutely had to nail my colours to the mast, I think City will be good again. I think Pep will turn it around, but I'm not super confident about it. It's asking a lot. City, this is a manager who has been brilliant, but has also presided over a really severe downturn in form and has got to pick it back up, and it's going to be fascinating to see if he can. I
just wanted to say, because I know we've sort of been lured in, haven't we, by City and just desperate to get it stuck into them, like the job that Carlo Ancelotti is doing with Real Madrid. And I know we talked about the evolution of their squad, but this season when you actually looked at it, and it's the same thing said over and over again, and it was true. It's like, how do you get Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. into this team? And Ancelotti being Ancelotti, ever the pragmatist, seems to have found a way. And two players that love coming in off the left-hand side, the way they were rotating between the 9 and playing off the left, the problems that causes for an opposition defence. It seems simple. Bringing Rodrigo back in, and Rodrigo was really good for them because of his off-the-ball work. And I mean, for Mbappe, that was one of his major criticisms at PSG. He seems to have found a way of getting Real Madrid through, because they're in the playoff. They were in the playoff, weren't they? I mean, we're saying they're the great Real Madrid and whatever else.
Well, they're favourites. Everyone's favourites now. All of a sudden, after this,
that's taken time, and it's clearly been worked on. And I think even with Mbappe as well. I mean, the way he left PSG, the fact that the hangover from that, the dispute with Paris Saint-Germain over his unpaid salary, major story back in France, and it's just that's still going on. You have that going on.
He had 3 goals in 11 appearances.
Yeah. Dropped from the France squad, like that's as France captain.
That game against the Classico, the first Classico, and he was like offside 8 times or something. Yes. They lost 4-0. It was like, where is this guy? So it's come good.
Yeah.
I thought Belling was brilliant as well. Just supreme confidence.
He's had to adapt
stage
as well. Though,
I know we're used to that now, but he just every time you watch it, it's like, my God. And he's making the guy always making that late run into the box as well. I think that kind of creates overloads in space for others as well.
He's had to adapt, there was one hasn't he?
Where Vinny Jr. cut it back and he's controlled in his left and punched it out to Rodrigo with his right. It was just like absolutely perfect technique. Rodrigo should have scored. That would have made it 4, I think. He was involved in a lot of what Real did well, and the stuff off the ball, which you have to say is a huge part of what made Real really impressive last night, was how quickly they kind of snuffed out space and pressed City.
Yeah, there was lots of chest bumping defenders as well. Not on board with that though, surely. You'll let him off.
As long as it's not Rudiger.
You'll let him off. You'll let him off. Ominous signs for the rest of the competition with how good Real Madrid are. Let's look at some other Champions League highlights or lowlights. Gregor, Celtic, heartbreak for them and Brendan Rodgers' side. Sorry, I didn't know whether you wanted to talk about it or not.
I think this is a high-low light.
High-low light, right, okay. I think that comes from a good place as well. Anyway, carry on.
I mean, it was the best Celtic performance against a European kind of heavyweight, which Bayern are still, although they looked more like Burnley, for a long time, for years and years. And like the three chances in the first half they had.
Yeah, can we clip that up as well, please? Gregor saying that Bayern Munich are like Burnley. That's definitely worse than me saying City are like Wenger's Arsenal.
They looked like, it was like watching Burnley last season. Not this season, with their clean sheets record.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Last season, when they just passed the ball around and didn't go anywhere. Really didn't create much of note.
Yeah.
They did a lot to work a chance to cross it into the box that they could have done 50 passes earlier. And like Jeffrey Schlupp up against Elise, kind of shackling him. Then Leroy Sané, Alistair Johnson the other side against Gnabry, and then Coman, like Schmeichel making big saves. They were brilliant. Celtic were brilliant. I think they looked like a better coached team.
Yeah. So
And
do you agree
I'm
with
biased, but I honestly think they did.
Michael
And then
Grant has written on the website about Rodgers giving Celtic a standing and a purpose in this competition again. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't forget the thrashing from Dortmund, and a lot changed after that. But you still kind of fear that Celtic have those games in them on the road in particular. But
Yeah.
that Atalanta game, beating Leipzig at home, this game in particular, was brilliant. I remember looking at the clock, and it was the 78th minute was the first time I felt any form of anxiety about, like, we're starting to look a wee bit tired now,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to hold on.
Which for a Scot is pretty impressive to go that long without any anxiety in a football match.
Cheeky bastard.
Come on, we're having a laugh. It's all fine.
Anyway, they were brilliant. So yeah, it was tough to take. It was very tough to take. But like, there's a part of you thinks, if we got to extra time, this might have happened anyway because
Yes.
we were beginning to tire.
Yes.
But
Starting to cling on.
really good campaign for Celtic.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and a classy way to bow out as well. They handle it with dignity, which is more than can be said.
Piss taking bastard.
No, I'm not. That was my link. That was my link to Atalanta. Arguably the story that we could have started with on this top of this show. Never mind Real Madrid and Manchester City. Atalanta. There's two things I want to mention here. We'll start with the slightly more serious one. Ademola Lookman, of course, superstar for Atalanta last season, scoring a hat-trick in the final of the Europa League?
Yeah, shortlisted for the Ballon d'Or as well.
Shortlisted for the Ballon d'Or, has had to defend himself after being absolutely booted by his own manager, being called one of the worst penalty takers I've ever seen. Lookman missing a penalty in their knockout tie against Bruges. But, by the way, he had a 100% record for the club from the penalty spot before Tuesday night. And then his own manager comes out, says he's the worst penalty taker I've ever seen. And Lookman's forced to go on social media and talk about feeling deeply disrespectful. There's been things going on behind the... I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it? Greg, I mean, you've probably got called out a couple of times in your career, but never like that, surely.
No, I mean,
And you were good at penalties.
there's got to be something else going on in this.
It's
surely.
crazy, isn't it?
I mean, the fact he was on the bench and although he scored like a minute after he came on.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not like his part in this game was
I mean,
was outrageous.
Look,
Do we think Gianpiero Gasparini has seen the clip of that penalty that he had for Fulham? The one where, he tried to Ravonna it down the
that
middle.
was terrible, wasn't it? That was in West Ham when they were fighting
2020
relegation.
Scott Parker was
Certainly
covering
a relegation battling season, yeah.
Oh God, that was bad. Maybe that way, but he didn't mention that though. That would have added
That was good of him.
That would have added
That
a
was-
bit of a bit of credit to his comments. But yeah, Lookman posted a comments on social media saying, "It saddens me on a day like this to have to write this statement. Most of all because of what we achieved together as a team and as a city."
Quickly, he didn't have to do it, Ademola.
He didn't have to what? Put
No,
the
he
statement.
didn't have to do this. No.
You think he should have left it?
Well, you could go knock on his door and talk to him in private. I don't think everything's public these days and like almost semi-performative.
Yeah, but that suggests it's a bit more, and I think he says that,
Gasparini doesn't
he?
strike me as a quiet word in his office type manager, though, does he?
We'll try that first. Maybe they have tried it. Again, you're right. We don't know.
Maybe he
everything's
called
going
him
on behind
19 times and got blanked by it and was like, right, do you know what? I've had enough of this.
Maybe.
Instagram it is.
Maybe.
I've had enough.
Maybe.
I've had enough. Anyway, that was, I would say, the least extraordinary thing to come out of the Atalanta game. Easily the best thing I've seen in the Champions League this season, maybe ever. Rafael Toloi. Listeners, if you have not seen this red card from this game for the Atalanta player, it is maybe my favourite red card ever in the history of all football. The Atalanta player takes kind of bit of a shove, bit of argy-bargy on the touchline. Frustrations are growing. He gets up with the ball in his hand, goes to throw the ball at the Bruges player. It falls out of his hand in a pathetic fashion. He slips at the same time. Rather than that being like, oh, okay, that's embarrassing, gets up again with the ball, drops it again, slips again, charges at the Bruges player, and you think, oh my God, he's going to rugby tackle him, he's going to headbutt him, and he kind of just falls into him with a little bit of a shoulder charge.
We also forgot to mention there that he barged through the referee.
Barged past the referee. Barged past the referee.
He was like,
there's,
"No."
there's also another brilliant angle of it. I really encourage you to watch as many replays of this as you can. There's an angle of it as well from the other side where you can see one of his teammates going, "No, Rafa, no, don't do it." As well as like they're used to the red mist descending in. And he's the captain. He's the captain.
With
isn't he?
the
He's
captain's
the captain
armband
armband
as well,
as
just really adds to the whole...
Absolutely superb. One of the best things I've ever seen. Not necessarily maybe the best bit of podcasting because you can't see it while you're listening to this, but in fact, stop the podcast now and go and listen to it. it will easily
I
be.
do wish he had actually done something like rugby tackle.
Well, if you've got that's
the
the
thing
thing,
is,
isn't it?
he did all of that, and there'd been so many things that would have been worse. Like actually throwing the ball off him would have been worse.
Yeah.
You know, at the last moment he changed his mind.
Oh, it's-
He had like a sort of change of heart. Like
Bottled
okay,
it.
I've just
Yeah.
gonna fall into him.
Bottled it.
There'd be a great what is going through his mind at all those moments. Like it's the slip and the ball dropping out of the hand. Anyway, absolutely fantastic. If you've not seen it, go and check it out. And if you have seen it, go and watch it again. It's easily the best thing to come out of the Champions League so far this season. Anyway, an absolutely jam-packed show. Loads of put downs, loads of jokes, loads of gags, and loads of analysis. And there's more to come in the second half. But it's time for a break. So it's time for the quiz question. Who am I talking about when I say a former footballer who played as a midfielder for Ajax, Sampdoria, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, AC Milan and Botafogo and won the Champions League with 3 of those teams? Nice and easy. Find out after the break. Hello and welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. I'm Tom Clarke and I've got Pete Rutzler, James Gheerbrant and Gregor Robertson with me. There was stunned silence. I caught them off guard. A European-themed quiz question, but we did get the answer in the end. Pete Rutzler.
Clarence Seedorf.
Clarence Seedorf, the only player to have won the Champions League with 3 different clubs. Great fact for you there. Test your mates at the weekend. Anyway, let's move on to the other big game of Wednesday night to Villa Park and the thriller between Aston Villa and Liverpool. Same thing, you know, this is a democracy on this podcast. Over to you guys. Which team do you want to start with first? Don't all shout at once. Go.
Neither. Darwin Núñez.
No, Darwin Núñez. Fine, Darwin Núñez.
Well, that's Liverpool. Okay, let's start with Liverpool.
No, we can start with Darwin Núñez. I feel so sorry for him. I don't think he's a bad player.
He's not a bad player, I know. But he's not the striker they hoped they were signing. I think he's probably.
Is he done? You think he's done?
Soon, yeah. I think so. Yeah. I mean,
I won't name him, but as I say, you do get the privilege of being in the office sometimes where certain sub-editors show their colours, and one of our young trainees, not quite part of his training, not quite got the decorum down of like, you know, just quietly like he's living every moment. And at one point he might have said, "Get rid of it! I'll ship him off now. Get rid." And I was like, anyone got any work for this person to do? Because slightly losing track. Do you think?
Well, I think that's kind of. I don't think all Liverpool fans are quite, you know, in that extreme. But there's been a journey here. There was like a defence sort of mini industry around him.
Yeah, there was.
He should be playing. He's got like no matter what, he's worth it because of the chaos he creates. He should be starting. Yes, he might not score, but he's creating opportunities for other players in the team in the forward line. He's part of Liverpool's best team. That's completely gone now. That's faded. That's fallen by the wayside. No one thinks he should be playing. I don't think anyone believes he's going to ever change his finishing like record, the number of chances he's going to need to score goals. There's still a lot of fondness for him, I think, because of the way he plays and his sort of, you know, his attitude, his work rate, his part of it is probably a bit of sympathy too. Just everybody wishing that he was going to be something that he's not, but I think he's not. So he's not. He's gonna have to go, I think.
He has had really good moments even in this campaign. I think like there was the 2-2 against Arsenal where he assisted Liverpool's equaliser. It was Alexander-Arnold played a brilliant pass forward, and Núñez played actually a really, really. It's hard to sort of like. I think it's one of those things that was much harder than it looked. The sort of cutback, you know, there was in between 2 defenders that was absolutely perfect. And he played well, I thought, also against Chelsea at Anfield. But you're right. He's not your sort of reliable like. He's not in the best 11 at the moment. I think that's clear. He's not. He's sort of like, and in a way they're very different because you've got, but in some ways he sort of exemplifies the same sort of dilemma as Kai Havertz.
I was just going to say, is it the Havertz conundrum?
He's someone who gives you an awful lot in that centre forward position, but is just not a reliable finisher.
Just can't score a one-on-one.
And it's that sort of like, you know, is that worth it? Although they come in sort of very different packages, sort of, you know, sort of clean cut, sort of German kind of efficiency and the sort of, you know, Darwin sort of wild chaos. There was no national stereotyping there. I think I just managed to steer clear of sort of sort of national stereotypes there. But Yeah, I still, I've sort of been sort of broadly kind of pro Darwin, and I sort of still think he's a good player. But I do agree with Gregor. He's clearly fallen out of Liverpool's best team at the moment.
Well, I think it was 75 million euros transfer fee as well. Like when you invested that much in someone who's your centre forward, I don't think you can invest that again and have him just sitting falling by the wayside even further. Comes a point where you have to make a decision about who your centre forward is, the one that you're investing that kind of money in, and I don't think it's him.
He's very impulsive in many ways, isn't he? Everything's instant, and it can go, and that's the chaos, isn't it? He's not a refined player, and you think that's probably more Jurgen Klopp type, and I think one of the...
Is that modern football as well, though?
Well,
are we all to blame for this desire for, clinical, beautiful, lovely stuff? A bit of chaos is all right, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is, but it's also, the chaos is okay if you can put the ball in from the 6 yard box when it's, it's not out over the bar.
The one thing that Arne Slot sort of brought to this Liverpool team is that sort of business-like efficiency, that little bit more control to their game than that they had in a previous era. And you just think that stands out a little bit more maybe with Darwin, and maybe there's a coach that can refine those rough edges. I just don't know whether that's going to be Slot. And I mean, obviously we're only still early in his tenure, so maybe he might think, oh, maybe I could. But I just don't.
I did think his comments were interesting after the game. I don't know whether you saw them on the TV. He said, we're all really disappointed, but in that dressing room, there's going to be one player who's more disappointed. You know who I mean. And I was like, oh my God, he's absolutely bodied him. That is outrageous. And then I spoke to Charlotte Dunker afterwards, and she said in the press conference, it was a bit more measured. He'd obviously gone back and gone, oh Christ, I shouldn't have said that. It's not very in keeping with my style so far this season. He's like, we're all really disappointed. Darwin, next time he gets that chance, I'm sure he'll bury it. He's the kind of, he won't do that over and over again. I'm like, no, too late, Arnie, you've already said it.
Yeah, he said he's not the kind of player who would miss it the next time. I know that's the problem. He is.
Yeah,
it's a shame because he's scored some great goals too, and great moments. You think of the one at St James's Park. It was like, wow, this is a turning point.
It when I say about Slot being the right coach to get the best out of him. Like, he's clearly a player whose confidence is very, very low now. And when a coach says that in that way, then that's not exactly conducive to trying to build him back up again, which suggests we're at more of an end point really for him at Liverpool. But
Sticking with Liverpool generally then, moving on from Núñez in this performance, we talked on Monday, Gregor, with Tony Cascarino and Hamza about, even though they won against Wolves, a dismal performance in the second half, they were saying it was the worst they'd seen. Very emotional, tough match against Everton. What did we think of this performance as a whole? I think I was quite impressed with the energy that they showed, because a lot of the narrative or the questions has been, can they keep this up? Long season, loads of games. We talk so much about how many games footballers play, but I thought they looked like they matched Villa for intensity and energy and pressing in Villa Park, which can often be a, quote, hard place to go. But defensively, a little bit more suspect than they would have liked. It's quite soft goals to concede, Gregor, or do we then start straying into praising Villa here?
Yeah, absolutely.
This can be the slalom into us praising Villa.
Watkins' header was a great finish.
Great finish,
and,
yes.
Good crossing from Digne. Tielemans was a good finish as well, I think. So I think you can. I think maybe there's truth in what you're saying, but I think they were also really good goals from a Villa point of view.
They come from a good place.
No, you're an idiot. The fact that there's one thing that is a big issue now is that Trent's fitness issues. He came off and then Conor Bradley came on. He's got an injury at the end, so they might not have a right back for the City game.
In terms
Gomez is injured too.
In terms of how many times Villa got in behind them, though, I think it's interesting. I've been interested watching Virgil van Dijk, who's been so imperious and brilliant all season. But even little things, and this is a question that you will know far more about than me, there's moments where in games against teams like Villa where they're looking to get in behind, and they've got Rashford and Watkins prepared to run. Van Dijk drops a little bit before everyone else, and I'm watching it as an amateur going, that's not what you're meant to do, you're meant to keep the line. But he drops as if to go, it's all right, I'll just mop it all up, but I don't trust any of you idiots. Is that tiredness? Is that worry? Is that just good defending? Is that sensible defending against a Villa team that are like this and have got that ability to get in behind you?
I think when we're talking about Virgil van Dijk, we'll lean towards good defending. I think in terms of reading of the game,
I'm not saying it's criticism of him. I'm talking about what it might say about the rest of the team and the back four.
That Liverpool have changed as well. It's not like an actual kind of core tenet of their play to be right on the halfway line and being as brave and sometimes borderline daft to try and hold that line given the risk of Villa's. You've got to say Villa's front four now looks like
amazing.
Yeah,
amazing. I saw that team and I was
Rashford,
like, wow.
Watkins, that's a brilliant front four. Like particularly when Asensio and Rashford get up to full speed.
Yeah, this Rashford lad looks quite good, doesn't he? Where's he been for ages?
And it's not just that. It's like it's the depth as well. You know,
Yes.
because that's not even including like Jacob Ramsey or like Leon Bailey.
Moyan come off the bench.
Malin, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Malyan, yeah. In terms of Villa then, what did we think about that idea of that attacking team, but making them a little bit more open, a little bit un-Unai Emery-like?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing with Rashford and Asensio is what you're going to get off the ball compared to what they may have had before. And I think an element of that will just be adjustment. One, in terms of how they work with them when they're both playing, and also getting up to speed, as you said. Because they, on the ball, they seem really good fits. Like Asensio, the way he can drop off the front line, pull into space, create overloads in the middle, gives Watkins more autonomy up top. Rashford, it's like reversing what they were doing before, where they'd have a wide forward on the right, and now they've got a wide forward from the left, and that suits Rashford. We haven't really seen Rashford in that role for quite some time.
He looked great, didn't he? Just doing what he did when he first came on the scene. Give and goes, getting in behind, direct running. I mean, we talked in the first half of the show about the best players are at their best when they do things simply.
Pete's makes a valid point though, because the off the ball stuff was always an issue for Rashford at United.
Yeah.
And there's no, there's not going to be any grey areas under Unai Emery. If he wants to play in the team on a consistent basis, he's got to do that stuff. But yeah, there's no doubt when he gets the ball and he's, his head's up and he's running at players and he's dancing around it like he's one of the best. So
I like how you did a little dance then. When I just did that. That was really cute. Quick word for Andres Garcia at right back, Gregor, for Aston Villa. We're talking about defenders in the first half with Kusanov. That pass, I didn't love it, but I did kind of love it. The hands immediately on the head. Oh my God, it was like kind of like slapstick comedy or a bit like kind of kid's cartoon. It was like, oh no, oh my God, what have I done? It's a bit like he almost did it on purpose. He didn't, of course. But I thought he looked very good going forward. But again, maybe that Emery thing of you suddenly looking like you've got attacking fullbacks, Digne, Garcia. You've got a front four. So it's a lot of work for Yuri Tillemans, who I thought was brilliant, excellent. John McGinn.
They're very good in transitions, aren't they, Villa? And that whole game was that. Liverpool were also quite good in that, which made it really an entertaining game. Yeah. Emery wants to be on the right side of the balance between the two, and it is quite a fine line. We saw with Mings and Disasi's come in. He hasn't played that regularly. Mings has had his issues. He's come back into the team. Those two have got to be super, super solid. Otherwise, they will definitely feel that bit more open. And particularly if you've got a right back like Garcia who's coming in, and the mistakes happen. But they, as you say, they're quite forward thinking. I mean, normally you'd sit with a three and one of them would sit, but getting that adjustment right at the back is going to be quite. As part of the adaptation, I think there's signs that make sense, and we think, can that give them the lift? But it could just in terms of balance of the team, it could swing a little bit the other way.
I think one man who would have not enjoyed, but been glad of Núñez's miss was Jota, because my God, his miss as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Completely ballooned it wide.
Shocking.
Oh my God, yeah. That's just he is someone who when he goes through in those positions, you think that's a goal. Mm-hmm. You have total faith in him, and there's a reason for that. But you don't have that same faith about Núñez.
Yeah. Well, you'd launched in with Darwin Núñez. I thought you were going to launch in with John McGinn, because I'm making the theme of this show. People go and check out little videos I've seen on social media. Have we all seen the video of John McGinn warming up with the mascot last night at Aston Villa? Beautiful. What a lovely... He's just a good lad, isn't he? You can just tell. Good arse, good lad. That's what you say about John McGinn on this podcast. Let's move it into the weekend. And Villa have got another huge game this weekend, this time against Chelsea. Link... We're going to talk about Chelsea. There you go. Nice and simple. Keep it simple. Pete, I wanted to ask you cover Chelsea for us, keeping tabs on this club this season. We talked about them on recent shows, what an interesting season it has been. I wanted to talk about what is success for them this season, where they are in the table at the moment, still have to go to the Conference League. Where do you think Chelsea are going this season? Because as I've said to other members of the team on recent shows, it's quietly tailing off in quite a bad and dramatic way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think this is a really pressing topic at the moment with Chelsea, and I think it comes back to identity of what they want to be and how, actually adjusting to this reality of, actually, we're not going to win everything this year. We're in a process. We've got a process coach who wants to build over a set period of time and got young players. That is quite an adjustment. And I think in terms of expectation.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the way the supporters reacted to the result at Brighton last Friday reflected that. You had them saying that, we want our Chelsea back, when in the space of 2 months they've gone from saying we already have it back. And I think there's a lot of everything is young and inexperienced at Chelsea, and I think that's also been reflected in Enzo Maresca a lot more recently. I think he's not coached 100 games yet, I don't think, as a head coach. And he's got to try and navigate this and bring everyone with him. And I think he's made a couple of maybe slight missteps in things he said, going out of the FA Cup and saying, we can focus on the league now and the Conference League. And it's just, to Chelsea supporters, like, well, hold on a minute. We want to win these trophies, And then even last week saying, when I signed, that the target was the Champions League, not this season, it's next season. And it's like, that doesn't fit right with Chelsea. And it doesn't fit right in terms of their investment. It's brought up all the time, but when you make that kind of outlay, yes, you're investing in the future, but you've got to be looking at the Champions League, and then you factor in how good they were in the first half of the season. When you say what is success? Success, absolutely. It should be Champions League football this season.
They were title contenders on this podcast at one point, weren't they, Gregor? Not in your eyes, I know. Listen, I know, all-wise, all-knowing Gregor Robertson knows everything when it comes to Chelsea. But Pete's points there about Maresca, James, Gregor, whoever wants to jump in, what do we think it's increasingly on him, or is it more that it's also about the youth and the experience in the squad as well? Or are we starting to look a little bit more at Maresca and go, you've made a few missteps here that could be quite damaging to you?
I've thought all along that Chelsea have a sort of quite uneven squad, and I've felt since the start of the season they have a real lack of quality in 2 positions. Well, 3 positions. Goalkeeper and the 2 wing positions. I just don't think that Sanchez and Jorgensen, and then the winger kind of group, which is Mudryk, Madueke, Sancho and Pedro Neto, is of the level of where Chelsea's aspirations are, of, being a tight Champions League title contending team. I just don't think.
I'd add striker and centre after that.
That
says quite a lot.
Yeah, maybe.
So they've just got a couple of good midfielders, really. So he's overperforming, is what you're saying.
Well, I think that was what I felt at the start of the season that he was overperforming.
Right.
That the Maresca was certainly was doing better than I expected him to do. Put it that way. But I always felt it's an interesting one because I always felt Maresca, he just has the look and feel of a manager who, if things were to go wrong for him, I don't know, and they've started doing, albeit belatedly. I just don't know how much kind of affection and sort of like love from the Chelsea fans is going to be there to fall back on, because he's sort of, he's not a coach who has a particular connection with the club. He's someone who had a good playing career, but not that sort of, stellar playing career that really sort
not
of
admired,
kind of inspires, sort of gives you a bit of gravitas and kind of inspires sort of admiration. He's not someone who's sort of like, kind of massively charismatic presence. So I just and obviously there's the history of Chelsea, the recent history of Chelsea, and so I just always felt he could be quite a sort of vulnerable figure if things started to go wrong. But you obviously may have your own take on that.
No, I think you're right. I think that's definitely a key part of it. There are a couple of things that spring to mind. I think we talk about the squad, and Maresca is one part of it, a part of sort of the picture of what Chelsea are, right? And we talk about their squad planning and the fact that they have pivoted to youth. And I was thinking about this the other day because I covered a bit of PSG, because they did similar. They've completely redone their squad.
Right.
We're going to be younger. We're going to have more French players. But then I thought about some of the key elements of the club setup while doing that. First of all, in the playing stuff, you still have Marquinhos. You still have Kimpembe. You still have some very experienced players within the group. They've not gone to a point where Tosin Adarabioyo is the oldest player in the team, regarded for his leadership, and he's 27 and is making his step back into an elite club, and he's got to lead this really young group. But then you look at the coach, and the coach is Luis Enrique. Incredible amount of experience, incredible amount of success, carries a great deal more authority. Then you look at the sport,
top playing career as well.
Exactly,
And so you have that kind of gravitas from that.
And then you look at the sporting director is Luis Campos, widely revered for his work at Monaco and then Lille, wanted regularly by some of the biggest teams in the game. Those sort of experience aspects are around the young squad. It's almost to guide them.
Yeah.
And at this point, this is where you think you need someone to guide. And it's been regularly repeated, Chelsea, they need experience, they need a centre-back. But it also feels like it's the whole place kind of needs that, someone to sort of guide the process along a bit. As I said, Maresca's very, very inexperienced as a coach, particularly at this level. The two co-sporting directors haven't really held a sporting director role before they were at Monaco and at Brighton. The ownership's new. It's all very new, and that's what makes this whole challenge of bringing through a young squad together all the more difficult. And I think even the Brighton game, what was so striking, and we mentioned this with Cole Palmer and why his form's gone off, because he seems so frustrated, and that's so not Cole Palmer. He's relaxed, he has fun, that's when he's at his best. But it's the whole team as well. It's like kids squabbling. It's like who's there? It's just going to sort of knock heads together, guide this group through. And to what extent does not having that impact the development of these players that the club want them to grow and become elite players together? Like how does that impinge? And that's where the dynamic, I think, is different to other similar projects, I think, that go for youth. Even Brighton, Brighton have they've got James Milner, Adam Lallana, Danny Welbeck.
Yeah,
there are still
Chelsea
experienced
aren't
heads
the
around
only
it.
club who've like taken a massive pivot towards youth and buying players that are obviously going to be cheaper and on lower wages and develop them and think they're huge prospects. But just the difference they've done it is the scale and leaving no room for the other players, the experienced players who are getting towards 30 or in their 30s, who have a lot to offer and contribute and can help develop the players around them. They've just left no room for that. So we've spoken about this for a long time. That always seemed to be the thing. They thought they were the kind of chief disruptors, and then when it's going well, everyone gets giddy. But it's not. That's always going to be the case, I think.
From your experience,
over a full course of a season, when you have periods where they'll look, oh my god, look at this! It's so exciting, the youth and energy, and confidence. But over the course of a season, people think you sound like a dinosaur when you talk about experienced players and leadership and these qualities. People talk about them for a reason. You do need them over the course of a season.
I wanted to ask you specifically, because you've been in dressing rooms and you see the dynamics. There's a relative authority about certain players compared to others even if you're just in there, that maybe get you through certain games or whatever, but just as a group, how that sort of changes the whole culture. I think Chelsea have hired Willie Issa, the rugby league player, and they talk about him as I saw Matt Peat talking about him, his former coach, saying he will change the culture, and I think that's interesting, because that's trying to guide this young culture with an outside person who's not a player. I was wondering from your own experience, how important that is, just to have the different elements of your career. So, this is what you're doing at this stage, and seeing how you act and the different things you're doing outside of football.
I just think it's when you get to moments that, like Chelsea are in just now, moments of difficulty or hardship, that it's having players who've actually experienced that before and come through the other side. And some of it is about the young players looking at them and knowing that, acknowledging that fact that this is something that's maybe, while it's new to them, it's not to someone else alongside you. And part of it is about the fact that a team, like the dynamics of a team, needs all these different ingredients and personalities. And as much, you can have the best talent in the world, and Chelsea have signed a lot of the most promising talent in the world. There's also no guarantee that they're going to become, fulfill their potential, essentially. So this is not new. It's kind of not new, but just whenever Chelsea fall back into it, have a difficult period, it's something that.
It's interesting to sort of wonder about a parallel universe where maybe they'd kept, just 2 or 3 players. How different would this situation be if they had this current squad, but you also had Jorginho and Kovacic, for example, just there, just to kind of just guide a bit, as you're saying? Just
Well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, with Jorginho, how Arteta's talked about him being as important, not even on the pitch, just
Exactly.
on the bench,
Precisely.
talking to the young players,
100%.
when it's Wanyeri, Lewis Skelly, etc. Just to wrap up then, Chelsea, the kind of the point which we introduced, what is success? Do we think, and all of you kind of chime in whenever, do they have to get Champions League for this season to be a success?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
James, do you think they could get away with a Conference League win and a finish in 6th?
I mean, I don't know that they're at the start of the season that they had one of the 5 strongest squads. I don't know. I'm kind of I'm sort of on the edge with that. I think
You're allowed to be on the fence. That's where Gregor always sits all the time.
I think 6th in Conference League
might
don't
just
know.
be enough.
It's the thing is, it's sort of like that doesn't sort of befit the stature of Chelsea as a club, but actually, is that really underperformance for the current squad and the current situation they have? I'm less sure about that, but
James.
Is it underperformance for the expenditure?
That's the other.
For the expenditure and the talent,
another way of looking at
potentially. If you're a Chelsea fan who wants to answer what is success, you can get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk. We're going to finish with 2 things, guys. A prediction and a quiz question. Bill Edgar's weekly quiz about the weekend's fixtures is always great fun on the Times website, and I really enjoyed this one, looking ahead to Everton against Manchester United. He asked, which of the following has Manchester United's Bruno Fernandes recorded in the Premier League? 47 games since he won a tackle, 47 shots at goal direct from a free kick since he last scored with that mode of shooting, 47 games since he last played a match in which he did not commit a foul, or 47 starts since he was last substituted. Which of those 4?
Substitute.
Yeah.
Gregor goes substituted. James?
I was thinking 47 games since he last had a game without committing a foul.
You're all wrong, I'm afraid. It's 47 shots at goal direct from a free kick since he last scored in that way. So there you go, Bruno. Make sure you bang one in from 25 yards this weekend. And Gregor, last week on Thursday, Man City had a big game against Newcastle, and we finished with a round of predictions that went really well for me. So I thought I'd do it again. I said last week that Newcastle would win against Manchester City. This weekend they've got Liverpool, so we're going to finish with a round of predictions. And I'm going to say 2-2. 2-2. Gregor?
I'm not giving you a score, but I'm going Liverpool win.
Okay. Bottle job. Pete?
3-1 Liverpool.
3-1 Liverpool.
I think 2-1 to Liverpool.
2-1 to Liverpool. Bunch of wimps, all of you. Honestly. Bunch of wimps, but loads of great analysis as always. We'll leave it there. Pete Rutzler, James Gheerbrant and Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you too for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back on Monday to talk about that Manchester City draw with Liverpool. We'll see you then.